welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren from Lauren and the Books. I've had an emergency haircut, haven't I? We're about to go into lockdown 2 here in the UK, which means that I wasn't going to be able to get my hair cut this year. So booked in with my hairdresser yesterday, got my hair cut, little fringe put in. Don't know I'm going to manage with that by myself, but so far so good. But today is not talk through my haircut day, it is what I read in October. Now, I've already done a wrap-up in October, and I will link that down below. And in that wrap-up, I wrapped up 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 books. Well, let me tell you, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 books. So that means I read 20 books in October. Well done me, that is a lot for me. Normally I'm a sort of like 13 to 15 book kind of gal. I wonder what happened that I read so much more. I don't know what's happened. So yeah, there's already a part 1 of this wrap up. I will link that down below. And actually one of these books I finished yesterday, which was the 1st of November. So that will be included in there, but I couldn't wait to talk about it because it's probably my favourite book of the year. Loved it so much. But let's start at the very beginning of halfway through the month. And we'll talk about the first book that I read halfway through the month, and that's The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. I will insert this picture of this book here. I borrowed it from my friend Emma. Richard Osman in the UK is a TV game show host mainly. I think he started work as a researcher for television programmes, and he has now written this this sort of like cosy murder mystery type book set on a retirement village where 4 different people are trying to solve, they meet on a Thursday afternoon and try to solve sort of like cold cases, and then there's a murder that's done which is very much a hot case, very open, and they get very much involved with solving that case. Now I thought it was all right. I enjoyed it at the time, and I was reading it and thinking it was a like cozy tick, murder mystery tick, sort of a host of characters tick. But for me, this just didn't do anything new. It didn't bring me anything new that I thought was going to be like really into. I was surprised to learn that Steven Spielberg's film company have bought the rights to this, because I don't know how sort of explosive like TV program it's going to be. It was just fine. It was just fine, and I gave it 3 stars. But in retrospect, I'd probably pop that down to a 2 now. Not like there was honestly like a 2-star rating for me is it was okay. Like you only get a 1 star if I didn't like it, so it was okay. So it was okay, and it will be for some people. It's doing really, really well. I see it like on all the best sellers lists and like things like that. So yeah, I think it's going to be, it'll be fine without my review. The next book I read was a book I got out from the library, and that is My Name Is Why by Lem Sissy, shiny front cover. This was fantastic and original and unlike anything I'd sort of ever read before. It's a memoir of Lem's life. So this is Lem here on the front cover. He was sent into the care system very, very early on in his life, from when he was a baby, and renamed Norman. And this whole book is a retelling of his childhood in that care system, with excerpts and actual like copies of like the majority of the book is copies of reports from his social workers and sort of liaisons between his foster parents and his care workers. Each chapter starts with a Lem Sissy is a poet, and each chapter starts with a poem. There's lots of sort of like pictures and stuff throughout, and it was just heartbreaking to hear of him sort of being passed all over the place, him not ever truly really knowing who he is, him being told that his mother had given him up, but then later on finding out that his mother had been in contact trying to bring him back to herself, and yeah, it's just so much sad, like the sort of his identity just so out of his grasp his whole childhood, and like for such a young person, it just, yeah, it absolutely broke my heart. But really, really, really interesting. I think this will stay with me for a really, really long time. And like I said, just a really interesting original memoir type thing that I'd never read anything like this before, with actual excerpts of reports and stuff like that. And just so seeing him, like hearing him react to some of the things that are written about him in these reports, and like how basically he's just being passed all over the place, and like people, like one particular set of foster carers saying they don't want him to come for Christmas Day and stuff like that. It just must have been like, it was hard for me to read, so I can only imagine how hard this would have been for Lem to put together. So emotional, amazing, hard-hitting, like really, really great. I gave it 4 stars. Next up was a little a little series of essays by Zadie Smith. These 6 essays were written during lockdown. It's a tiny little slip of a thing. I ordered it online from Waterstones, and when it arrived I was like, oh, I didn't know it'd be this small, because I just saw the front cover. Zadie Smith is she's like one of the first sort of like adult like when I got into like reading properly, she's one of the first books I read on beauty, and I remember my nan buying it for me and me reading it, so I always have like a sort of like special relationship with Zadie Smith. Her essays are, this sounds so stupid and I put this in my Instagram review, but like you can really tell that they're written by Zadie Smith. She's got a very, very sort of unique writing talent, and all of her writing is amazing. Some of these, like, as is the case with essay collections, some of them were for me and some of them weren't. I particularly found interesting, there's an essay about a pandemic of contempt, and linking that in with the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that, and I found that really, really interesting and sort of just so true and raw. I was just like, yeah, nodding along. And then one of the later ones is one of the last essay, in fact, is sort of like a the acknowledgements almost, but told in little tiny bits to the people that she wants to thank and the people that she's loved over throughout her life. And I just found that very touching and lovely. So yeah, I gave that 3 stars. Next up was The Hate You Give. So I read this on my e-reader. David and I did something earlier this month called Book versus Film, and I will link that down below, where we pick 5 books and films, and over the course of a week I sit down and read the book version of the film, or the film version, and David will watch the film version of that book or film, whatever came first. Normally the book comes first, and we just sit down, and then halfway through the film we have a little chat. So an hour in we have a little chat and say, oh, where have you got up to, oh, this is what's happening here. And yeah, The Hate You Give was one of the films and books that we did for Book versus Film. And I'd got this out from the library before, started reading it and then had to return it because it was due back. So getting this out on my e-reader and reading it, I was really, really thrilled about how much I enjoyed this and thought that this was an amazing book. So this isn't a new book, and I'm sure you've heard lots about it, but this is all about a young teenager, Star, who in the very, very early stages of this book, literally within like the first few chapters, her friend, she's out in a car with her friend, who gets murdered by the police. He gets shot and murdered by the police for seemingly reaching for a, well, seemingly, he definitely was reaching for a hairbrush. They think he's got a weapon, or they claim that they think he's got a weapon, and they shoot him. So that happened. I knew that was the book, what the book was about, but because it happened so fast at the beginning of the book, the whole book sort of unfolds with the follow-up from this, and Star doing a statement about this, and like hearing about it from her community and her, but also within all of this, which is like super important stuff, you've got Star being a teenager and worrying about what her boyfriend thinks of her, or going to the prom, or having fallouts with friends, and like it's so like perfectly balanced between like this really heavy important shit and her being a teenager. Like I just think it's a masterpiece. It's a YA book, and it's just so important and so amazingly done. I'm a bit disappointed in myself it's taking me so long to read it now, but I'm so delighted that I did. David really, really loved the film. He said that the film was really great, and actually while I was reading the book, I'd be looking up and seeing literally like, I don't know if Angie Thomas had anything to do with the film, because it looked as though they'd done a really good sort of like cut from what was on my page to what was happening in the film. But yeah, I thought it was amazing. Really thought it was fantastic. The next book I listened to, I also really enjoyed, and that's Ramble Book by Adam Buxton. Now I listened to this on audiobook. Adam Buxton, I came to Adam Buxton via his podcast. I wasn't there for sort of like the Adam and Joe glory days. He makes a podcast. He used to have a radio show with his friend Joe, which I know was very, very popular sort of in the late 2000s, I think it was, when I was at university. I remember people being into it, but it was just never something. I was more of a Russell Brand podcast girl. But David had always been into him, and I started listening to his podcast, and I really like Adam Buxton. I think he's just, you know, one of the good guys. Like he's got really thoughtful, like when he interviews people, he says really thoughtful things, and he's really sort of like a great interviewer, but it's so full of humour and heart. Like everything he does is full of heart, I think is what I want to say. And this book, his Ramble Book, which as I said I listened to, sort of replicated that sort of warmth of his podcast. into this book, and there's a lot in there about the death of his father. He cared for his father in his last sort of few months, and he'd had quite a sort of like, his father sounded like quite a difficult person, and I don't like Adam makes that clear in the book. So caring for somebody in the last months of their lives when you've had quite a sort of like difficult relationship with them was really eye-opening. But it's just, look, there was like such heartbreaking bits like that, but also measured up against like the bits where actually like I weed myself a bit. I was laughing so much. There's a bit where he talks about Christmas lists, and he reads out a Christmas list of like one of his friends, I think, and it's just literally like the funniest thing I've ever read. But yeah, I really appreciate him, is what I want to say. Like, I really enjoy his content and art, and I love this, and I think I will go back and listen to it again because I really thought it was great. Next up was the book that we read for my Patreon book club. That was The Death of Mrs Westaway by Ruth Ware. We had a really great discussion about this. It wasn't loved as a whole during like, not everybody in Patreon book club loved this book, however we loved talking about it. So this is a crime thriller about a girl, Harriet Westaway, who's in sort of like financial troubles, and she gets a letter saying that her grandmother's died, and that she's involved in the will, so she goes along. But her grandparents died many years ago. She knows this isn't her grandparents, but she goes along and meets these sort of like the family members and stuff like that, and then you sort of read like the follow-up from that. Now the whole thing is that Harriet works as a tarot card, I don't know what you call that, tarot card reader, on a pier, and she doesn't believe in tarot, so she's aware that she's quite a good sort of like actor and potentially like a sort of con person and is able to con people. And throughout this, she's like, oh, if there's one person who's going to be able to pull off this sort of like long con, that I'm involved with this family, like I am this family's like granddaughter, then it's me. But she's fucking useless at it. She's just rubbish, and there's just like loads of plot holes and things like that. But like I said, we had a really great time discussing it, and although like it was not by any means one of the best books I've read this year, I think I gave it 2 stars, we had a really great time discussing it, so that was quite fun. But yeah, hell of a lot of plot holes, hell of a lot of sort of like what but I enjoyed the discussion, I really did. Next up, 5-star book, Greek Myths, written by BookTube's own Jean of Jean's Bookish Thoughts. Had a lovely time with this. Now what this really gave me was proper nostalgia feels. So when I was younger for Christmas, I would always get a sort of reference book for Christmas. These would sort of branch from like Encyclopedia Britannica. I remember getting the Encyclopedia in 1997, to sort of like more specific books about things like Greek myths, geography, planets. I was really into stuff like this, and I used to just like just get so into and so attached to these books, that I would have sort of like certain pages which were my favourite, certain passages which were my favourite, certain drawings which were my favourite, and I really got that vibe throughout this book. So this is all about Greek myths, as you would imagine, with some of lovely illustrations. The illustrations are done by Katie Ponder, and just had such a lovely time with it, just reading. Like, I had sort of like basic knowledge about Greek myths, mainly from Hercules, the Disney film, which I found out they got it all wrong, because in here they're telling me what actually happened. But yeah, it was just lovely to sort of like learn these things, and a lot of stuff like where like I've read books which have been based on these myths, or which I've done later on this month actually. It was good to get like the solid hard facts, but just such a treat. Really loved it. Thought it was really great, really thought it was amazing. Next up was another audiobook. I listened to After the Silence by Louise O'Neill. I was disappointed in this book. I really liked Louise O'Neill's books, and this was her first sort of like thriller mystery, set on an island off the coast of West Cork, with looking at a murder which happened years ago for a young girl on the island, and on the night of the murder, nobody got on or off the island, so they know it was never solved, and they know that somebody on the island did it, etc. And now there is an Australian like media team who've come to make a documentary about it, and we're following Keelan's, who lives on the island, her perspective, her husband, who was accused of the murder but never got that wasn't found guilty for it, or I don't even think it got to court actually. But yeah, I mean, I found it really difficult. I thought it was very sort of like clunky and back and forth all the time between times which just didn't work. Like, I don't know, because like obviously like in a thriller that is normally like the perfect way to unfold it, but it just didn't feel like it worked. And yeah, I really fucking hated Henry. So like Keelan's husband Henry, who is accused of this murder, like I actually was like in a bad mood going into it because I hated him so much. So as well as this case that's going on, there's like other themes in there of sort of like being a victim of gaslighting and controlling behaviour and abuse, basically like psychological abuse, which Keelan is at the hands of Henry. But yeah, I just really hated him, and every time I knew I was listening to it, I was getting like myself really worked up because I knew I hated Henry so much. But yeah, it just wasn't for me, and I was really disappointed because I thought I was going to absolutely love it. Like I'd heard that it was based on the podcast West Cork, which I listened to earlier this year, maybe, or maybe last year, but really enjoyed it. But yeah, it just didn't really do much for me. Next up is The Familiars by Stacey Halls. I listened to The Foundling by Stacey Halls earlier this year and very much enjoyed this. So what I would say is that like this is historical fiction, but both Stacey Halls books I've read, and I don't feel like this is a proper spoiler, but like both of them have got really happy endings and everything seems to be really tied up nicely at the end. So if you're into historical fiction or you want more happy endings at the moment in your readings, The Familiars and The Foundling, and I actually enjoyed The Foundling lots more than I enjoyed The Familiars, go and give those a try because they're very nice, comforting reads, easy reads, and like I said, with happy endings. So this you're following, oh by the way, the name of the woman in this, I love her name so much. So you're following Fleetwood Shuttleworth. This is set in 1612 in Lancashire. She's 17, she's married, and she's trying to have a baby, and she gets a midwife. So there's all sort of like different things going on, but the main sort of thread of the story is that she gets herself a midwife called Alice, somebody that she finds walking in the grounds one day, who's very good with sort of like herbalism and stuff like that, and alongside this sort of like her trying to keep, she's lost many babies before and she's trying to hang on to this baby, there's sort of like a theme of witches and women being tried for witches, and the Pendle, I think it's called the Pendle witches. So yeah, I enjoyed that. What I will say is that this dragged for like honestly probably about the last half of the book. I was really into the first half of the book, and then after that it really dragged, and I feel like not really much happened in the last half for it to be worth the sort of length of it. So yeah, I still thought it was great. We discussed this in my book club with my friends on Facebook, and the girl who actually picked this book has a big knowledge of the Pendle witches, and it was very interesting to hear about things from her point of view. But yeah, if you were to read a Stacey Halls book, I thought the Foundling was much better. But like I said, historical fiction with happy endings. If you're looking for happy endings at the moment, and who bloody isn't, then I would definitely recommend Stacey Halls. I'm only going to go into like brief detail about this. This is a reread. This is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell, illustrated by Faith Erin Hicks. This is a lovely autumnal graphic novel set on a pumpkin patch with Deja and Josiah. They're working their last shift of the season, and this is actually their last shift ever because they're off to university and they want to have the best night ever on their last shift, and they go and try all these things, and it's about friendship, and it's about fun, and it's about autumnal stuff. David read it for Cozy Reader Night. I read it in like the space of 40 minutes, had a lovely time with it. 5 stars, so fun, so lovely, great representation, brilliant, would recommend. However, in my head it's November now, which means it's Christmas, so that's done with till next year. And then the last book, if I can just dedicate a bit of time to this last book, which I finished yesterday, which is November yesterday, but I can't wait until either the end of November or midway through November to talk about this book because I just loved it so much. And that's Love in Colour by Bolu Babalola. These are a series of short stories which are myth and folklore retellings from around the world, and they're all sort of based, they're women-centred, and they're all sort of romance stories. Now, both of those things, romance and short stories, neither of those are my favourite genre. I've been known to enjoy a short story collection, I've been known to enjoy a romance book, but they're neither things that I would go to. But the reason I went to this is because the cover is so beautiful. So this was a pure cover buy for me. I remember buying it in Waterstones in Canterbury earlier this year and being like, oh, I can't, that is just so beautiful, I must own that. And how, like, just to have the insides of this as beautiful as this front cover. So, as I said, they're all sort of myth and folklore and legend retellings. Each story is, the title of the story is one of the characters within there. So if we just talk about my favourite story, which is Psyche, which is a retelling of Eros and Psyche, and is it Eros and Psyche? Yeah, from ancient Greece. Linking in with the ancient Greece book I read earlier, and Olympus, which is where the Greek gods live, is relocated and reimagined as a media magazine, and all of the gods, so like Hermes and things like that, they've all got different job roles within this magazine. And I mean, that one I loved the most, but I loved all of these. There's literally like no bad stories in there. Thisbe was another one I really enjoyed, Nefertiti, and they're just so full of joy. And I can't say there's no sex in here. It's a romance book with like very little, there's not sort of like explicit sex scenes, but there's real like passion, and sort of like the kissing scenes and the flirting scenes are really intense and really like nice. And not in a like, sometimes when I read romance I'm like, ugh, get the bad, I think they call it the ick, but like that did not happen at all through here. I was just like, it just all felt so real and so perfect. I fucking cannot wait to read more what Bolu Babalola has got. Like, I can't wait to read everything she writes, because this was just amazing. I absolutely adored it. Like, I just thought it was fantastic. I really, really adored it. And yeah, I think this is my favourite book of the year. It was just, every time I picked it up, like this face I've got now was the face I had when I was reading it. I thought it was amazing. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Highly recommend. Just thought it was fantastic. So yeah, so those are the books that I read in the second half of October. 11 of them. Very much enjoyed, like, I can't believe I read 20 books in October. Well done me. I wonder if I can keep that up in November. Who knows? I'm off for a week now. I might be able to. Let me know what you guys have read in the month of October. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I've discussed today, and I'll see you all again soon for another BookTube video. Goodbye!